My wife developed a meningioma, so it's a brain tumor. Pretty much at the same time, I had developed Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. I had no prior history to that. It was extreme to the point that when I finally got to have a colonoscopy in New London, Connecticut, they said it's the worst we've ever seen. And then we had 6 months to endure of my situation and then Judy's brain surgery. That was pretty bottom. We had no expectations in the future. It's right now. So now we're 10 years later and we're still pretty much doing the same thing. I would say it's been a tremendous difference. How do I compare that? I compare that to people my age. I'm 68, whether it's high school people that, in the high school reunions, get to see them on Facebook, or people I went to college with, they look a hell of a lot older than I do. I mean, we had lost a lot. So it's in the middle of kind of a lot of stress. We had my only brother died 2008. We had really tolerated our practice had been doing really well. 2008 came along and our patients suddenly couldn't afford their copay, which affected our income. And we had previously bought a big building. And so some of the other rental spaces couldn't afford their spaces. And the whole thing started to unwind and collapse. So that was a lot of stress. Death of my brother after 9 years of multiple myeloma was stress. Judy was diagnosed not long after that with a meningioma that needed a 13-hour brain surgery that was a couple of months later. But we got to see the image, which was the size of a plum. It's like, wow, this is serious. I was, diagnosed with Crohn's and colitis. And so it was extreme. And to the point that when I finally got to have a colonoscopy in New London, Connecticut, they said it's the worst we've ever seen. One of the things that happens when you have those conditions is that you lose blood. It drips out of you, it leaves with your stool. And so I was getting very anemic. And they said, well, we'll put you on steroids and other meds. If things don't improve in 90 days, we'll have to go back in and cut out, they call bowel resection. So we dealt with all that. I had never been in that situation, going from obviously stress had to do with it, family loss, mother died pretty much the same time my brother a year before, financial stress, wife's health situation. It just all exploded internally and externally. It all kind of just imploded. It was kind of the point that, we also had to realize we just had to sell the building, declare bankruptcy, and do all these things. Despite that, our patients had no idea of that. They're still, they go, oh, this is a great service. It's like, no, you don't understand. The costs are too much, and et cetera. With all of that loss, there's an odd sense of freedom. I mean, so we had pain in our life, but there's an odd sense of freedom because there's nothing to keep track of anymore. Keep track of your breath. So had to deal with that. And suddenly it's like, well, if I'm such a smart doctor, why am I so sick? And why is it this bad? And so I obviously had to learn more than I thought I knew for Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, and to basically take ownership of your own disease. I'm a naturopathic doctor, a master's in science in acupuncture, certified acupuncturist. Also, further than that, a 4-year Chinese herbal medicine program, certified in that. So it gives me a whole nother degree called Diplomat of Oriental Medicine. And so to that, I say, who cares? It's just what I like about Chinese medicine. It's all about context. It's not about the disease in one pill. So anyway, so that in naturopathic medicine is what I've been embodied with. As much as you say, well, that's what doctors are for. Doctors are so, how do I put this in a nice way? They obviously did me some good service, but they're also very ignorant, wasted a lot of critical time. So in that 90 days, I had to change doctors because anemia was not going away. Found another gastroenterologist. He said, oh my God, you need blood transfusions. So I got 4 blood transfusions. My hematocrit was down to 15. It should be at 45. So that's kind of borderline life or death. With the new blood, I got a new mind back. And so I decided to go to gastroenterology conferences. And so how I felt then, I felt like a fraud, actually. I mean, you're really sick. And when you have a hematocrit of 15, the image that I was seeing of myself was a dying fish as they float belly up on the surface of the water, saying, this is it. So I'm not really in a position to, yeah, I'm looking for somebody to help me a little bit. Felt pretty helpless. I thought my heart was going to pop out of my chest before I had the blood transfusions, because you get tachycardic with so little blood. So all those, that's where I thought, and my wife thought I was going to be, it was pretty certain I was going to be dead by the following Christmas. And so the transfusions helped a lot, but also still under the care of those doctors, they gave me various drugs that did not really, my wife thinks that they helped partially, but created a lot of arthritis, really made you live in a fog, and you had to give yourself shots every other day and every other leg?
I would say for us, it wasn't this big miraculous experience. It wasn't like Shazam, you found the cure and you're going to be healthy. No, it wasn't that way. I'm a naturopathic doctor, and so we grew our own vegetables. We did eat meat, but we were primarily, I would say, mostly vegetarian, but we had meat, so I can't say I was vegetarian. We were unprocessed foods. Most people, when they discover keto, come from the world of a very processed food orientation. So for them, it's a big step. So for me, though, the concept of being metabolically adapted to just burning fat was a new concept for me. So that's now 10, 13 years ago, 10, 11 years ago. And said, gee, why don't I give that a try? The link, though, from all this, I didn't just discover it like this is before a couple of years before it even got to be fashionable. And what I was after for my own health was a thing called butyrate. Butyrate is a 4-chain fatty acid, and it's what they call the preferred fuel of the large intestine. Just like glutamine is the preferred fuel of the small intestine, branched chain amino acids for the liver, et cetera, right? So each organ actually has a preferred fuel. So, and that was not new. I remember through clinic, though I never had the opportunity or the need to treat this, is that if you could get butyrate into a person with ulcerative colitis, which is primarily large intestine, and Crohn's, which is, they overlap, but it's small intestine, that you would have a healing. So I was after butyrate. Do I go find some butyrate and figure that out? I started going to conventional, meaning the MD, medical doctors, gastroenterology meeting. So I went off I needed 4 blood transfusions. So after my blood transfusions, and I was somewhat more conscious, I went to an international conference in Chicago and then one down in Miami and started communicating with these people about fecal microbiota transplant. Now they just call it FMT or FT. But what I was after was that preferred fuel. And you can get enemas, butyrate enemas, and so you deliver it as an enema, but it's very foul smelling. That was all that was available. Now what you can do is you can get enteric-coated butyrate, so you're taking it orally, and it dissolves ideally in your small intestine and your large intestine. But that's not how it was then. So I was thinking, gosh. So I started hearing about, well, the ketogenic diet creates various ketones, 3 different ketones. And one of them, the most predominant one, is called beta hydroxybutyrate. I go, seriously, is that the same butyrate? I mean, often the thing about biochemistry, you can have one molecule that has 4 different names, so it's not like everybody calls something the same thing. Beta hydroxybutyrate, in my mind, said, this well could be the same thing. One is coming through molecular biology and the other is coming through kind of a supplement orientation. Then I was fascinated with it, and I thought, I have nothing to lose. Why don't I shift to a ketogenic diet? And if I get this stuff for free, meaning I don't have to put anything up my butt as an enema, I can do ketogenic diet, or even, have whatever kind of fats, and you get more aware of, caprylic acid, which is C8, makes even ketones faster, and you learn all about the different saturated fats and what happens to them. So that was a big deal, though I never got an answer to that. I do believe it's the same thing, because people who do go on a ketogenic diet, they do have Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, do improve dramatically. And there's not enough studies on that. So that's kind of a fringe comment, but I believe there are a few studies now on that. But before then, it was just all, well, makes sense to me. Your gut should improve. So anyway, things improved for me. And then looking towards Judy, my wife's side of the meningioma, it's like, well, what we knew was a glioblastoma, which is kind of a very fast growing brain tumor, which is not the same as what she had. She had meningioma, which is slow growing. So the fast growing tumors are generally glucose dependent, right? And that's kind of the thing about cancers in general. They're glucose dependent, and that's the whole idea of Tom Siegfried's approach to using a ketogenic diet and other things to treat cancer. You try to make this person devoid of glucose, and therefore you've made it hard for cancer to exist. And then you do a few other things on top of that, of course. So all that sounded good, and I think that was instrumental, but there's only a few small sort of almost anecdotal studies about meningiomas and the ketogenic diet. So it's no big study out there, like 10 people took it and they all went on and all disappeared. Nope. Nothing's that black and white. And by the way, even if that were true, that study would probably not come out because it would challenge the pharmaceutical companies too much, and they would probably shut it down or keep it just like in this age of disinformation. If you can afford to block the other guy's truth, then you'll make money. So anyway, that's where we went. We went pretty desperate, so we listened really pretty well. And at least I had sort of a medical background, so I wasn't intimidated with all these other things. I was a little confused with just talking to people who knew about molecular chemistry and were not in the medical side because they had their little jargon, and I had to sort of like translate their jargon into, well, maybe this is that.
I think my gut healed because of the ketogenic diet, primarily because of all the other things that plants contain, like oxalates and so on and so forth, that you're not having. We were big gardeners, so it was never about processed food. It was about salads or not, other veggies. And so I sort of stepped away from that, saying that was a big step, to leave your gardens each year and bringing it in, and it's like not necessary. That was a wow factor. And yet, now I'm the other side, and I think there's a lot to it. But I started realizing everybody has their agenda. Even naturopathic medicine has their agenda. I'm not saying they're all plant-based, and I'm not trying, and I appreciate my colleagues, but I just think that people are not self-examining of their own prejudices, and they project it onto their clientele. I went to subsequent conferences as well, and now you have testimonies coming in of people who did. I won't say there's an agenda with keto conferences, but there's people like to present their successes and not their failures. And so, and that's fine. It's not a complete presentation, and that's the way life is, right? And it's not exactly marketing. But however, the ketogenic diet is successful for less than 50% of the people who pursue it. I spent a couple of days up with Dr. Westman up at Duke, which was nice to see patients together. And he told me that, and he said that in a number of conferences as well. I would then say, why is that? That's an interesting setup. If it's so agreed upon, why is that? And of course, the arrogance of conventional medicine is, oh, well, they didn't do this properly. They didn't understand it. I would say, so you're saying they're stupid or lazy or unintelligent? Not at all. And it's like you have to back to Chinese medicine. It's the context of the person has to be considered, and that is not considered very much in conventional medicine. So exploring that way deep, hormonally, genomically, nutrient deficiencies, basic labs help me understand a lot of correlations and so on. And so my summary is I think a ketogenic diet could be helpful for 100%. There's always, in the high 90s. I think the examination has to be with assessing fairly deeply the person and bringing them down, bringing them forward gradually. So I think it can be successful. I think to leave 50% of the people, primarily it's about weight loss that people would consider it, of no help is a big mistake. It goes way beyond that. I mean, just like with epilepsy, neurological, MS, ALS, epilepsy, pediatric or otherwise. What else can we go to? You can go obviously do gut issues. Well, it's interesting. So by the time we got to the ketogenic diet, I'd been about 2 years away from really severe Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. And my wife had already had her brain surgery to have that removed. So the worst had passed. And we were left with, we stuck at mediocre health for the rest of our life, like, oh, we just survived, be thankful, or can we improve where we are? That was in front of us. So we weren't necessarily bad, but we weren't really healthy.
I always say the biggest takeaway lesson there was I stopped believing a lot of both physicians that I had been following or colleagues that I thought were more knowledgeable than me. I realized I have to build on my own knowledge. It might not be 1,500 studies, but it has to be something I earnestly believe. So I started doing my own labs as much as I could, or encouraged the doctor that was my doctor at the time to do them. And that was a fight there. We had to get another doctor, and it was a terrible experience. But when you fall, as I say, you have nothing more to lose. It's kind of a relief. There's nothing to do at the end of the day. There's no bills you have to pay. You're kind of in this stasis of, well, you get another day. Good for you. You earned another day. And that was kind of our attitude. And that's kind of a good attitude to go forward with, actually.
Back to the basic lesson from Chinese medicine, Chinese herbal medicine or acupuncture, you need to know your context before you launch into what you're going to treat. So I find American medicine, USA, in generally hyper superficial and very marketing oriented to, hey, let's do this if you've got this. It's never the case. It's never the case. That's what I'm working on now. And so I appreciate having that sort of mission I'm hoping, I talked to somebody recently of trying to automate my usefulness of the data of making the spreadsheets and the scatter plots and going through and extracting some of the relationships between the different variables of all the labs that I do to find relationships that are actionable. This is not esoteric information. This is vitamin D is not esoteric. Essential fatty acids are not esoteric. But linking that to liver problems, like people who are and hadn't been diagnosed as being type 2 diabetic, how do you bring them back? It's not just, hey, drop the carbs. That's part of it, but you got to bring them along. So that's where I'm at. I find it fascinating. I find it very interesting. I guess it's nice to sort of say that all the problems I've had have really helped sculpt out what I'm looking into now. Well, my wife's gone, has a channel of all these keto things that she's made, but basically in our reality of certainly the kitchen is really what medicine is in the United States, in a family. The kitchen is your hospital, because that's where you make the food. You choose what you're going to eat, right? So once you're into going back 100, 200 years and saying we make our own food, we're not going to the supermarket to buy the donuts. We have to make whatever we bring home, we cook it. Our diet is now, I can't remember what it was then. I'm sure it was moving. We were never big bread eaters, so I don't think we ever had breads. There were not a lot of changes that we had to make other than backing away from plants. Right now, we get up and we go work out. We come back, we have coffee, wake up with coffee, and we go work out, we come back. Our breakfast has become a routine now is a turkey burger. I have, Judy makes the turkey burgers, which are just two. I separate the egg yolks from the egg white. I put the egg whites in little tubs, put it in the refrigerator. I have 5 or 6 raw egg yolks a day. I put 2 on the turkey burger. I save 3 or a couple for the rest of the day. It's usually 3 off for dinner. Our dinner is steak or fish or burgers or chicken. Lunch is anywhere between what's left over in the refrigerator. I mean, it's almost reproducible. We do have a couple of raised bed gardens out back, but that's for things like basil and jalapenos and a few of the spices, tarragon and so on that we like to cook with, but that's the extent of it. And so periodically, so what we do with the egg whites, we just make protein bread, and so we have 1,000 different varieties of, excuse me, protein bread, which we use at the end of dinner as our kind of dessert. But that's the simplicity of what we do. I mean, there's other than periodically on the weekend, like tonight, so we'll have some wine, Friday, Saturday, maybe Sunday. I probably have 5 cups of coffee, maybe even arguably 6 cups of coffee in the course of a day. I don't use sugar. I use stevia if I need to sweeten it. It's pretty hyper simple. What we were breaking away from was probably having less in the way of plants. And the thing is, when you either grow or you buy salad stuff, it all goes bad. So the first thing that we noticed is we never had any, once we started backing away from that, we didn't have food that went bad because we ate the burgers or the chicken or the fish or the whatever, and there was never leftovers that went to waste. Whereas salad stuff, there was always this. We didn't, oh, I got to eat this salad stuff because it's going to go bad. So that was probably the biggest change for us.
So, people have to be conscious of their own health. They have to want to make a change. If you've talked to other doctors, you realize the only people that really pay attention to what you're saying are people that really have to make a change. And those people are usually in a lot of pain. And those people usually are probably have some diagnosis that has something to do with cancer. So they listen and they're willing to do the hard things because they know they don't have a lot of time. When you back off the seriousness of the diagnosis of their situation and you reduce that pain, it's not as painful for them. It's like, oh, maybe I'll try it. Maybe not. Yeah, I don't know. I'll see how it goes. A lot of people have lung cancer and don't want to stop smoking. Why is that? You go, well, logic is because they've come in their own mind by saying, we all die sometimes, and I like my cigarettes. There you go. How are you going to get into that? You can't tie them down. You can't make their decisions. But so it's a consciousness, and you really can go down a rabbit hole about that. It's really about where do they get meaning in their life? And if they have meaning, you attach it to the meaning, and they're willing to make a change, usually. Can't find the meaning, it's not going to happen. That was a roundabout way. We're at the point of most people don't want to put that kind of effort into something they take for granted, which is their health. So until they start to lose it, they're probably not going to snap to it and saying, I think I got to try something different. I see it all the time. What's really interesting, the degree that one chooses to take that fork in the road and become healthier, they are going to make themselves gradually more and more different from the pack of people that they were with, called their high school group, their college group, their colleagues, wherever they're, or if it's a neighborhood thing. Once they stop eating donuts and all the treats and so on and so forth, they become the weirdo. And because they're invested in themselves and their own health, it's going to be kind of used against them. People are going to kind of resent you for taking a self-interest in making you being healthy. It's very odd. Even if you don't proselytize, even if you don't, encourage other people to do it, you're just taking care of yourself. Odd that is, but that's the difference you got to put up with and take care of yourself first.